she would not find a good husband. And even if find a husband, she would not be a good wife. I don't know where they got this idea that this troublesome thought. So actively, they were discouraging historically from the woman to get any education. And what I'm trying to convey with my presentation is that with the coming about of the body faith and appearance of a woman like Tahereh, when she broke all the past tradition, a new day had started. And her own life, actually.
Dear Hussein, apparently it's zooming on my face. Jeremiah, could you pin it on Hussein? There we go. Sorry, it was zooming on my face the whole time. Wow. No, everyone gets to see me while you're talking. I was like, what is this?
No, it's true, but I was also wondering, you are better looking than I am. Maybe that's why. Jeremiah figure out I do the talking while he's showing your face. That would be a double pleasure.
Fixed it.
I'm glad that you resolved that issue. Where was I? Okay. Speaking of Tahereh, let me say just a few words about the time that Tahereh was born and was living. The country, Iran, or what I like to call it, Persia, I think I mentioned in one of my presentations, I prefer to call that land Persia because with the Persia, using that name, it reminds you of some old culture, of some great poet like Hafiz and Khayyam. It reminds you of a great history, or remind you of coming of Zoroaster's and in the 2,000 years ago. But when you say Iran, unfortunately, right away, the picture that comes to your mind is a group of fanatics who are controlling all the affairs of the country and all the problem that the people, especially the women, have. So Persia, during the time that Tahereh was born, was run by a dynasty called Qajar dynasty, who originally they came from Afghanistan, and they were considered invaders, but then little by little they established themselves. The group, the people who became king, Muhammad Shah, Fath Ali Shah, then Nasruddin Shah, these were all bunch of incompetent leaders who indulged themselves very much in pleasure of themselves and hardly did anything worthwhile for the country. So it was under this condition and this situation that a woman like Tahereh appeared. Now, education in that country at that point was very limited. I read someplace that the rate of illiteracy was 95%, but I don't even believe that. I think we could go all the way to 99% illiteracy, because the people who could read and write were often the mullahs and religious leaders who have gone to school for year after year, and they study Quran, they study grammar, they study some poetry and things like this. And only the boys or the sons of the rich family had the opportunity to attend some of these mullahs' school. No opportunity whatsoever for the girls to get any education. So the education of Tahereh in the city of Qazvin was quite unusual. And this was due to her enlightened father and mother. Her mother herself was a great poet. She was a great scholar. Her grandmother was a great scholar. The whole family on her mother's side, they are accomplished folks in that town. Tahereh's father has set up a school, and this is also unusual in that time. Set up a school just for girls. And I'm sure there were a number of girls from a rich family who were attending, including Tahereh. And Tahereh's mother was one of the teachers in that school. So we know that she had the opportunity at home to be with some learned access to a large library. Actually, I may have a picture to show later of the library in their house, which was quite big and elaborate. Also, she had access to go to school and learn something. So all this thing adds up to create an unusual woman at the middle of 1820s and 1830s in Persia. I think she was maybe in her mid-20s, early 20s, that through her reading of the books in the library, she came across a movement called Sheikhi Movement. This Sheikhi movement was a new school of thought in Islam. It was quite radically different from tradition of Shia or Sunni. And the founder of this school of thought, Sheikh Ahmad Ahsai, was a genius. He combined the Greek philosophy with Islamic tradition and introduced some major new points to the Islam and its theology. For example, as an example, I tell you, there is a famous story that the Prophet Muhammad, in some occasion at nighttime, he transfers from Medina to Jerusalem, went there and came back. And that's why that mosque in Jerusalem is so significant, because Prophet Muhammad appeared there. Now, all these years from the time of Muhammad, most scholars, Islamic Muslim scholars, thought it was a physical transfer of the Prophet Muhammad's body. But Sheikh Ahmad was one of the first one who claimed that actually it was a spiritual. It was his soul or his spirit that transfers from one place to other place, which makes much more sense. So because of this kind of and there are much more information that we can study yourself if you want. Because of this unique ideology, it was many students of Islamic religion became attracted to Sheikh Ahmad Ahsai. And one of those was, of course, Tahereh. Tahereh started to read their writing, and at this point, the founder of the Sheikhi movement, Sheikh Ahmad, has died, and his successor was a fellow named Sayyid Kazim. There was correspondence between Tahereh and Sayyid Kazim, and she wrote a very famous and detailed defense of Sheikh Ahmad's school of thought, or Sheikhi school of thought. Writing this essay quite impressed Sayyid Kazim Rashidi, and he referred to her as Qurratul Ain, the solace of my eyes. And this was quite a beautiful title that he gave her. And for the rest of her life, she was also known as Qurratul Ain. Originally, when she was born, she was named Fatima. Later on, they also called her Zarrin Taj. Zarrin Taj means the golden hair. It's quite possible that her, in the childhood, her hair was either blonde or reddish, because Qazvin, the town that she was born, is in the area which is very much dominated by Turkish tribe and Turkish family. And many of them have this kind of a coloring of the hair. They're not black or brown, they're blonde hair. So she may have that. That's why they call her Zarrin Taj, the golden hair. And of course, she was also later on was named Tahereh by the Bab, and the title and the name Tahereh was confirmed by Baha'u'llah in the Badash conference. These are all historical facts. Go on, should read more about it. So she decided to go to Karbala and meet the master, Sayyid Kazim, the one who called her Qurratul Ain. And she and her sister, I think her name was Marzieh, they left Qazvin, and it was quite unusual for a woman to leave husband, leave children, and go. But I'm sure she offered that the husband can come. So she told her husband, I'm going to Qazvin. You come along. If you are not coming, too bad. You stay home. I'm going. I take my sister with me instead. So she went to Karbala, and then unfortunately, only 10 days before she arrived in Karbala, the Sayyid Kazim died. Remember, the trip those days was take a long time. They have to 2-3 months have to participate in caravan, wait for the group to keep traveling and going with them. The wife of Sayyid Kazem, realizing the extent of her knowledge and her learning, she asked her to conduct the classes that Sayyid Kazem was teaching throughout his life in their house. There were hundreds of students, including Mullah Hussein, including some other people who were students of Sayyid Kazem. The Tahereh became their teacher. Can you imagine at that time when the woman status and station were all quite low, they would ask a woman to conduct the classes for all these learned scholars and all these mullahs of the future. So of course she would do the classes from behind the curtain, and some of her views, especially was around this time that of course she also discovered the Babi faith and she became Babi. So between being a Sheikhi to start with and then become Babi, it was a radical change in the life of this woman and the life of subject that she was teaching and educating the community of Karbala. It caused serious friction, serious problem. Eventually, I think if you read again, I think I gave a talk on this subject before. She was forced to leave Karbala. She was sent to Baghdad. She was forced to leave the Ottoman Empire territory. And Karbala and Baghdad was there, and she had to go back to Iran. Actually, a few nights ago, I was talking about Tahereh's return to Iran. One of the places that she stopped when she was traveling was the city of Hamadan. Maybe perhaps later on I can elaborate more. City of Hamadan is has one of the biggest Jewish community in Iran at that time. I think it was so many Jews there because it's a burial place. Who is that? Sarah? Who is that Jewish queen who was quite an important figure in Jewish history? I don't remember right now her name. So, and Kashan and Hamadan was the two places that we have large number of Jews there. And it's amazing that so many of them, they became Baha'i, Babi and Baha'i. And some of them actually, they were part of, they became familiar with the Baha'i faith from Tahereh's time. I give you two examples. Muhammad Shah, the king of Persia, was traveling from Tehran going to Karbala, which is a holy place for Muslims to visit. Along with him, there was this Jewish doctor called Hakim. Hakim means doctor. You know, you have Gilbert Hakim. I wonder if they're the same family. And when Muhammad Shah was in Baghdad, this Hakim attended one of Tahereh's lectures. And he became quite impressed by this presentation of this woman behind the curtain, talking about the new day, new manifestation and all that. So later on, when he returned back to Iran, he investigated the Babi faith and he became a Babi. And the family of this doctor, they are quite wonderful Baha'is from a Jewish background, including, for example, Professor Hakim, who was a wonderful doctor and professor, and unfortunately they assassinated him after the Islamic Revolution of 1979. So, and also in the city of Hamadan, Tahereh educated lots of Jewish folks, and they became Babi at that time. And now we have their descendants all over the world from most wonderful families from Hamadan and Kashan are from that background. So because of her radical views and because of her insistence of educating the woman of Persia, it reached a point that the government and established religious community decided to put her to death. And you also recall the incident that he was in Badasht conference and she removed her veil from her face. Removal of the cover of her face is not just a simple act of removing your cover of face. Many people can do that. But it was significant in terms of breaking from the past this hijab, or it's not just a simple covering of the face, is a breaking the tradition, changing the norm. And Tahereh was in the forefront of those movements. So for all this reason, in year 1852, when she was only 36 years old, they put her to death. And as you know, they was in a late night time. They dragged her to a garden in the city of Tehran. They strangled her with her own scarf, and they dumped her body in a well and covered it dust with the stone and all that. So the thrust of my presentation and talk is that the appearance of this woman in that country was an amazing phenomenon. An education that she received herself, and the example that she put for the woman and the girls of Persia was quite unusual. And because of her ideology and because of this conscious effort to educate the woman and to teach the Babi faith, some great figure of her time and or shortly after became attracted to her. Someone like Iqbal of India, who was a great poet, and I think he received a Nobel Prize for literature. He was in love with her work. Someone like Lord Curzon, who was the Governor General of India on behalf of British Empire, was quite impressed with. Or someone like Professor Brown, one of the greatest Orientalists from Cambridge University. Even the Shah himself, the rumor is, or was, that he was anxious to marry her. And he even offered her, and he asked her, if you become my wife, you'll be my favorite one. I only have, 50, 60, 100 wives, but you'll be the best around. You have a special station. And then Tahereh answered him with a beautiful line of poetry. Let me see if I remember. Just a second. You and your throne and your majesty, enjoy what you have. Me, I am nothing but the wandering dervish. I am happy with my status. So let you be and let me be away from each other. I'm mishmashing the things, but this was the essence of her answer to the Shah when he proposed to marry her. I understand also from the writing of those, there is no painting, no picture, nothing of her. So if you see some work done by other people, these are all imagination. But the notion is that she was quite beautiful. And also the notion is that she was a little bit overweight, and she enjoyed her life because she, according to Abdul Baha, she loved sweets. And she enjoyed a candy and cookie. Her poetry, actually, why am I talking? I'm supposed to talk about education, but I love with this woman. I'm in love with her. Her poetry is quite popular among the Baha'is and non-Baha'is and being translated to many languages. But I have read some of her prose and some of the non-poetry writing, essays and all that. They are magnificent. They are much deeper and more significant than her poetry. More than 1,000 of books and articles and essays has been written about this woman. It's quite unusual that I think Professor Brown or Lord Curzon said that the appearance of a figure like Tahereh is very unusual in any culture. But then appearance of this woman in Persia is a miracle. And then it shows that, it's quite unexpected that an educated woman who pursuing the right of the woman could have born in that crazy country. Now, it was 50 years later, I think it was in the year 1899, that the Baha'is of Iran, they decided in the honor of Tahereh and in honor of her status to establish the first Baha'i school. They refer to it Tarbiyat. It was quite a significant accomplishment. And Abdul Baha, along with lots of other reformers, they were very much behind this movement. Financially, morally, and otherwise, it was Abdul Baha was constantly encouraging them and trying to expand the program. It reached a point that there were almost 50 Baha'i schools open throughout the country. And I think it was in the year 1911, the first major school opened for the girls in Tehran, also called Tarbiyat school for the girls. At some point, we had almost 4,700 Baha'i and non-Baha'i students participating in this school. As I said, there was 50 schools open in Tehran, Kashan, Yazd, Isfahan, Hamadan, and few other larger Baha'i community. I read someplace, and unfortunately, there is not much more information available, but I will try to find more. But the first Baha'i school for the boys and the girls started in 1870, and this was only 20 years after the martyrdom of Tahereh. And this school was opened in this, I think, city of Rasht in Mazandaran province, and by a man called Mullah Ali and his wife Alawi Khanum. I'm sure it's true, but if we can find more information about this school, it's quite interesting. He opened the school in 1870, he and his wife. After 12 years, in 1882, he was arrested. He was sent to Tehran for being a Baha'i and opening the school for the kid or the student. And in Tehran, he was put to death. Most of this Baha'i school, unfortunately, they were constantly under harass and attack by the fanatic mullahs and by conservative element of society. Some of this school, for example, the one in Sangsar, was put on fire. Many of them, the mullahs would issue what they call it fatwa, or religious statement that forced to close the schools. And then they have to go do all kind of things to open it up again. So this was a constant struggle to continue maintaining these schools. And Abdul Baha was quite anxious that this program to continue and provide all kind of financial help for them. One group that really helped the continuation of this school was American Baha'i community. Was, beside the Persian Baha'i community in America, American was the more established Baha'i community, and they provided substantial amount of money to maintaining this school. Lots of the students in those schools, they could not afford even a small amount of tuition that was required. And those tuition often was paid by some American family or American assembly or American community. And I know some of them, I have record of who got what. There's a statement that so-and-so received 52 months from American friends. I think they form a organization called Persian American Educational Society. It was a nonprofit organization, and it was through this agency that the large amount of money was sent to Persia. Not only financially, they helped this school, but even the manpower. There were some wonderful women that their histories is available. You can search on that. Woman by name Dr. Susan Moody was a physician practicing in America. Abdul Baha encouraged her to go to Iran. She went there, she set up a clinic for the woman in country, and she was also participating in Tarbiyat school for girls. A woman by the name Elizabeth Stewart, who was very active. There was another woman by the name Kappas, I think. And it was amazing, this poor woman, Kappas, in their way to Tehran, they were robbed from all their money by the thieves. And then she herself, after 9 years in that country, she died from typhus. And so the sacrifices and the help that this American woman done for education of Persian girls and boys is going to be remembered forever. What happened is the school was going on with all kind of ups and downs until 1934. At this point, Iran had a new king, Reza Shah, who pretty much wanted to control everything in the country and bring it under the domain of the central government. No relaxation of any laws or anything. Shoghi Effendi has advised, as we all know, that the Baha'is should obey the laws of the land, and we always do. But when it comes to certain matter of conscience, like respecting the Baha'i holidays, like joining the military force to fight, and few other things, Baha'is are encouraged and asked to follow their conscience. So what happened is, happened to have his office right next to the school for the boys, Tarbiyat school. And he enjoyed every morning when he goes to office to sit there and listen to the chanting and praying of these Baha'i kids. One day he goes to the office and he doesn't hear anything. It's quiet. So he inquired what's going on. They told him, oh, it's a Baha'i holiday and they closed the school. Ah, what do you mean they closed the school? It's not Baha'i, it's not considered official holiday. They either have to keep the school open or close it. Of course, Baha'is have to respect their laws of their own conscience, and they decide to close the schools. And even though the school was such a significant contribution to the welfare of Persia, thousands of people have 20th century, Yarshater, Sehun, Arjuman, Rasekh, these are big names in Persian culture, but of course may not make sense to some American friends, but most Persians know that these are really the shaker and founder of Persia in the contemporary society and time. So the school was closed and the kids were spread and all over the place. Eventually they went to the other schools of their own and the neighborhood, wherever. And life was going on until 1979, which again, with the Islamic Revolution that took place, a whole new trauma and drama started against the Baha'is. And as we know that the Baha'i kids these days are deprived from any continuing the higher education, even though they pass all kind of entrance exam, they do not allow them to attend universities. They had this underground university, I don't like this underground university title, but it was a long, learning and through internet and all that. And some wonderful Baha'is all over the world are involved as much as they can to train some of these young kids. And many major American universities have accepted their learning that is done through the internet system. And they offer them degrees. And even if some of them make their way to America, they can go to grad schools and all that. I remember actually the story about this. A good friend of mine who was a professor of some university at Delaware, a woman, she decided to retire. So she retired. I think she was teaching some major scientific subject in physics or chemistry or something. So she was retired, but then she got involved in this program, teaching the Baha'i kids in Persia, long distance. So one day she met the dean of the university, her former boss, and the dean asked her, "What are you doing these days?" Oh, he said, "I'm involved in of this particular program." So the dean said, "Is it possible for me to take a look at the material and your syllabus and the curriculum that you are pursuing?" So she showed it to him. Boy, he was so impressed. He said, "Why don't you do the same thing for our student? The same subject that you are teaching the Baha'i kids in Persia, teach it here." So they start to pay her a great deal of salary, just do the same thing that she was doing there. So you see, God works in mysterious way. So if you do something good, you would get reward. I had a good friend in the old days in New York by the name Al Burley. Was a wonderful Afro-American friend. He was a good friend of Malcolm X, and through him I met Malcolm, and he became a Baha'i, and suddenly he became an angel. And one of the points that he always would say, he said, "Baha'u'llah is a good bookie. If you do one good thing, he would reward you 10 times. And he really believed in that. and I miss Albeli a lot. So I think I cover as much as I could. We have some pictures that Jeremiah is going to show you, and maybe I add some points here and there. And then if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. So as a lot of people have questions about this.
Sure. Okay, let me show you, say a few words.
Did you?
These are the picture. These are the pictures that I have selected. I have a good friend in Romania who have done some illustration for one of my books that I wrote about the Tahereh and junior youth. This is one of her illustration. It shows Tahereh, I think, with her sisters in their home, and the father sitting on a corner and observing. Her father always said, "Oh, how I wish this Tahereh was a boy." How silly he was. And didn't know that this girl is going to bring recognition to his family forever. So that's the father and the kids. Imagination of Samina. This is the library. Someone took a picture of this. It must be an old picture. It could be during the visit of Martha Root. Martha Root visited many countries and visited Tahereh's house in Qazvin. There's a scene in that book which is very impressive. I suggest you read that book. Is that she managed to get permission to visit Tahereh's house. You know, not many of Tahereh's family and relatives ever became Babi or Baha'i. They just stay away from that. So, but somehow she managed to go in that house, and then they beg from the owner of the house, which was a descendant of Tahereh, to allow her to go to her room, which she did. And I think the way she described it, she went on the ground and started to kiss the floor where Tahereh has walked in that place, and cry and pray and call her name. And later on, this relative was telling others we should be ashamed of ourselves, that a foreigner, a Farangi, come to our city, come to our house, and show this kind of love and respect for our ancestor, and we are not paying any attention to her. So anyway, this is part of Tahereh's house and the library that I'm sure she used often. Next picture. This is probably again another drawing by Samina, Tahereh and her children in their house in Karbala, I think. This is, what is it?
Ivan Lloyd.
Ivan Lloyd is another wonderful Baha'i painter and artist. This is Tahereh talking and lecturing to the woman. She's dressing in white. In the writing of Tahereh, you don't necessarily find much writing about equality of man and woman, this emancipation of woman. These are all new jargon and new describing of things. But the way she lived, the set of the belief that she followed equality, and she was pursuing that. This is another picture of Tahereh and the woman.
Drawing.
A drawing here. Next. This is there is a famous story the Baha'is are familiar with, that the Tahereh was sitting behind a curtain, had Abdul Baha on her lap. Abdul Baha was just a baby at that time. And then Great Wahid, the peerless one, was sitting in the other side of the curtain and started to recite Quran and gave a wonderful talk. When Tahereh began to call on him, and he said, "Oh, Wahid, time for talk and reading hadith and tradition is over. Get up and go and do something." I'm sure it was a shock to him that the woman talked to her like this, but then there was such a love between them that I'm sure he tolerated that, and then he listened to her. This is Wahid in one side, Tahereh is in the other side. Next. Oh, this is the sample of her handwriting. It's beautiful the way she and it's lots of her writing has been discovered and is available. It's most like the defense of Baha'i, putting the attack on the Sheikhi movement or on Babi faith and other stuff. This is I found some pictures of the schools that they have opened for the girls and all that. The woman sitting at the middle is Dr. Susan Moody. I don't know if you have a picture of that. I've seen a picture of, she died in 1934, actually, the same year they closed the high school. It's amazing. And it shows hundreds and hundreds of people are attending her funeral. She was very much loved by the Persian community, Baha'is and non-Baha'is, and well known. First, she was a compassionate doctor, and then second, of course, her contribution to schools and all that add to her prestige. Next. Again, it's her and some of the women, Dr. Susan Moody, and I think there's Ashraf, Ashraf is there. She, when another occasion, if I get the chance, I will talk about her. She was quite a modern type Tahereh. She came to America. I think she attended Columbia University, and she went back to Iran, and she did a wonderful work. It's called Ziya Ashraf, and is a well-known figure in socio-economic development of Persia. Next. Can you imagine an American woman, I shouldn't call it old woman, American woman at the middle of all these men who are admiring her and standing next to her, and they're so happy to be with her. This is at the middle is again Dr. Susan Moody. Next. This is again, I like this. There was hardly any mix of the boys and the girls in that society at that time. And I think in this picture, you see a group of young girls and young men who were all students in that Tarbiyat school. And the fellow who's sitting at the middle is my favorite man, Ali Akbar Furutan, who was a teacher, who was a director of the Tarbiyat school for a while.
Later on.
Who? Later on, yeah. Next. These are probably all the kids in their white uniform. One thing they were trying to do in this Baha'i school, beside the curriculum that was established by the government, they would add a whole bunch of new things, which is unusual. They were teaching foreign languages, French and English. They had physical education. They had the cooking classes, and number of other subjects that was hardly taught in the non-Baha'i school. And the kids who graduated from these Baha'i schools, the record shows they were much superior to others, and they were 1 or 2 grades above the rest of the community. Next.
Yes.
It's again, you see how many kids are involved. It's unbelievable. These are all students that God bless Tahereh. That's the movement that she started. And these were all often actually, especially when it comes to the girls, when they want to encourage the girl to be different, to be assertive, to be knowledgeable, they use Tahereh as an example. And many Persian, and even lately I noticed when American others, they named their kids Tahereh. So we can see the influence of this woman in the whole culture of the Baha'i faith and others. Next picture. Yeah, again, this wonderful ladies with some of the, probably there are some established Baha'i teachers and Baha'i folks in Tehran, most likely. Next. Is this one? Oh,
Little girls of the girls' school.
These are much younger kids. What they would do in most of these schools that they open, they start with elementary school, And then as the kids were growing up, and then they add the grade, and eventually high school was added to the system. Next. Yeah, these must be high school kids. No, we just look at this picture casually and we enjoy that. We don't know how significant are these pictures. Of these girls to come together and study and to become a useful citizen of the country and the community was unbelievable. Oh, this is the title of the book that the wonderful friend of mine, Bahi Nakhjavani, has written. It's a novel. It's called The Woman Who Read Too Much. Originally, it was written in French language, been translated to English, and is considered a great piece of literature. And it is really a story of Tahereh, but it's sort of a novel story. Next. And this is my our humble conversation between Hilary and I, our book, The Calling. Hopefully you save your money. And before I go to Apple Kingdom, you will buy and read it if you have any question. So it's a new cover for the book, The Calling. It's a new edition. It's coming out soon. Thank you very much. I think this was the last picture. No. Ready for action.
Thank you. Thank you. So there was a question, and now it seems a little late, but I'm going to ask it now anyway. The person that you were referring to earlier in your talk, the question is whether it was Esther that you were alluding to, not Sarah. Esther.
Esther, yeah, yes. Exactly. Yeah, that's the one. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, Esther was I think the wife of the king. It's a very colorful story. I suggest you read about it. And she saved the Jewish community from a massacre, and she is buried in Hamadan. And so that has become historically a place to pray and to visit. And because of her and her burial, Hamadan, and I think I mentioned Hamadan and Kashan, has become a great center of the Jewish community. You know, when Tahereh was coming back from Ottoman territory, she traveled to Kermanshah, then she came to Hamadan. She spent lots of time with the Jewish family at the time, and quite a number of them became acquainted with the faith, and some of them actually became Babi at that time. The contribution of the Jewish community to the Baha'i faith is quite significant, even these days. Many of them in the recent history has become martyrs, and it's unfortunate. But what sometimes I wonder, and I ask some of my friends this question, you know, the Jews in Iran at that time, even nowadays, was quite persecuted. You know, they were living in a ghetto and they were suffering, they had abuse and all that. For the life of me, I don't know why they became Babi or Baha'i. At least if you want to change your religion, become Muslim and get it over. So on top of it, of being a Jew, then they become Babi or Baha'i. So now you have a double jeopardy. You know, you have two things working against you. But I guess they were so convinced and so touched by the new teaching that none of this thing bothered them. So that's, oh, by the way, if you want to know more about the history of the Jewish community, since somebody mentioned Esther, there is a scholar called Mehrdad Amanat, who has written extensively on this subject. You know, Mehrdad Amanat, I think, is a cousin of Abbas Amanat and Hussein Amanat. These are wonderful, again, a Jewish family that they have. This family are a bunch of geniuses, all of them. I know quite a number of them, so that's so read more about it. Mehrdad Amanat is the author of the books on the subject. Okay, John.
Thank you. And actually, the question about these biases you brought up against religious minorities in Iran, is there still a bias against educated women in Iran?
There's not only bias, there's more than bias. They have this this notion in that bloody country and some of other places is that if a woman get education, she cannot find a good husband. And even if she find a husband, she would not be a good wife. I don't know where they got this idea, but this is really in the back of their head. How little they realize that an educated woman that could be a mother of the future generation, what a magnificent contribution can she make to the civilization. And that's why, in the Baha'i writing, I'm sure it's basic, you all know, that the education of the girls and women has been encouraged more than education of the boys. And my wife Tahereh always mentioned that the choice of her parents was either put her to medical school, which was costly, or put her brother to medical school. And they choose to put her, because I have seen the personal example. And I'm sure the boy was not very happy because he preferred to be a doctor. But this is how the Baha'is practice. They wanted their daughters and their girls, their future mothers, to be of somebody, to be illiterate, to be educated, and they would make a better wife and would. And I'm so glad I married an educated woman, a doctor, and since I married her, I didn't have to worry about looking for a job or worry about retirement. I figured out she would take care of me for the rest of my life. God bless her.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And the follow-up on that question, actually, since you mentioned it, so Baha'is teach that you should educate your girls over the boys if you have to choose between the two?
Exactly. This is definitely, I think, is a number of statements by Abdul Baha on the subject, that they said there's a preference should be given if you have a choice. Of course, you should educate all your children, afford to educate both of them. The best thing is to educate the girls because, as I mentioned, they would be the future mothers of the kids.
Okay. So there's a question from Mariam on Facebook asking, do you think that the fact that Iranians in general are such an educated population in comparison to other Middle Eastern countries and the whole world is directly related to the Tahereh schools?
I wouldn't go that far, that the Tahereh school had such an influence that the whole millions of Iranian got education. There is the desire to be educated and to go forward. It seems is part of the DNA of many Persian family. Actually, there was a study I read lately that even among those who have immigrated to America, if you compare them with other culture, I think they said more than millions of Iranian, 1.5 million Iranian have come to this country. And they give the percentage of doctors, engineers, major industrial computer and internet companies, and all that. So this is, I think, is a part of their things. And of course, Tahereh school and the other school that was open in Persia by reform-minded people in 19th and 20th century has contributed that. And another notion that I'm thinking, just occurred to me, is, Iran was always attacked by foreign countries and groups, by Arabs and Muslims, by Mongols, later on by Afghans, by British, by Americans, not directly, but they intervene in the affair of the country. So they have developed these survival skills that under different circumstances, they can continue progress. And one way of manifesting that was, of course, to gain as much education. And my heart goes to some of these poor Baha'i kids who are ready to go to college, to go become doctor. You know, they said for the first time in many years, there is a first generation of Iranian who has not have any Persian Baha'i doctors. There were hundreds of them that graduated from medical schools, and they were taking care of the sick patient and all that. But because they prevent them from going to the school and becoming a doctor, now all of a sudden, of course, you're missing this pool of the intelligent young men who could contribute to the society and to the civilization of the country. And that's so unfortunate. Another point come to my mind, and I'm just talking all over now, is that I've been very interested in the life of the martyrs, especially early martyrs, because many of my ancestors gave their life for the Babi faith and Baha'i faith. So I have studied the children and grandchildren of those Babis and Baha'is who are spread all over the world. And it's amazing how successful they are in their endeavor in education, in financial world, and all that. And I contribute that, believe me, to the blood of the martyrs that was shed. And so their descendants, they get the chance that to go to Brazil, to come to America, to go to Africa, and be so successful. That's also reward that I anticipate. And I just kid around with people sometimes. I said, I have lots of connection in Abha Kingdom because most of my ancestors are there. And if they are nice to me, I could recommend them so they can also get in. I'm joking, don't take it seriously. Huh?
Thanks for that. So 2 questions, and I don't want to belabor the first one, so I'll say, Michael asked from YouTube, what is the correct pronunciation of Tahereh? How do you correctly pronounce it? And second, before we go on that also, who is our guest sitting behind you?
Oh, it's very interesting. I tell you, life is very exciting in New York. Right now in my apartment, thank you, Baha'u'llah, again. I have a wonderful Baha'i sitting next to me. He's originally from Malaysia, a dedicated Baha'i by the name Jack. And I always said, if you ever meet Jack around the airport, don't say, hi, Jack, because then you're in trouble. Just say hello. Don't say, hi, Jack. So that's my friend, Jack from Malaysia. And then, of course, is Tatiana, who's my associate, and she is from Bulgaria, and I am from Neiris, Iran. I'm so proud of this village. I keep repeating. Usually people who come to America, they always try to pretend they are from Tehran. I know, for example, they are from some village of Iran, but when you ask them where you come from, oh, we are from Tehran. But somehow whenever they ask me where you come from Neiris, then of course, this gives me an opening to talk about Bahid and talk about what happened in that village and all that.
Your sound cut out for me. I'm not sure if...
Yeah, I have to...
Your sound cut out for me. You just said about Bahid and all that.
Okay.
I have to practice Tahereh, see how it sounds. Hello, Tahereh. Hello, Tahereh. Hello, Tahereh. Yeah, this is how it sounds.
So that's how you pronounce Tahereh?
Yes, that's how you pronounce it.
All right, there you go, Michael. There's a pronunciation for Tahereh. Thank you for asking that question.
Sure.
So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Adia.
Sure.
I keep vacillating between saying Hussein and Dr. Adia. So if I say either.
Actually, it's so funny that my wife is named Tahereh, and she always used this as an opening conversation about Baha'i faith. Of course, she said Tahereh, And then she tell them, do you know who's Tahereh originally? And this, no, she was a Babi, Baha'i, and this and that. So just having this this name actually is a very opening line for the teaching the faith. One thing I want to tell you about names, Baha'is' names. If you notice, many Baha'is, their last name is very colorful and meaningful. They are Sabet, Ahdiyeh, Rohani. Because what happened is in 1930s or 20s, the government started to issue and ask people to pick up a last name. And many Baha'is try to be colorful. They always try to pick up something that has some spiritual meaning. So they decided, and some of them, they even asked Abdul Baha that what shall we call ourselves? Poor Abdul Baha, he's so busy that he has to answer somebody's request to pick up a last name. And some of them actually is suggestion of Abdul Baha to pick up this name or that name. Now, the typical, you go to the office to pick up a last name, and they pick up some simple name, that can be useful as last name. But when Baha'is goes there to pick up last name, they pick up that, or they pick up Tahereh, they pick up Qudus and things like this. My father's name, speaking of names, my poor father's name was Baha'i. Can you imagine in that crazy country, crazy culture, name your kids Baha'i? From the moment that she was born throughout his life, poor guy suffered. Because as soon as he would say, what's your name? Baha'i, oh my God, job-wise, friend-wise. So when I was born, just to play it safe, gave me such a good Muslim name, call me Hussein. So I would not go through the same difficulty and problem. But then what happened to me? I came to America. And as soon as I said Hussein, oh, Saddam Hussein, King Hussein, are you an Arab? And this and that. So this looked like this name Tahereh and Hussein and this and that is, it could be a dilemma. How are you, Jack? Nice to see you.
Are there any other questions?
So we have gone through the questions that I see that we picked up, unless Jeremiah, you found another one that I don't see. But we have gone through all of them. And I want to, if there is any last minute questions, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Oh, look at that, Alex. Yes, Alex.
How come again we all see your face? Nobody see my face. What's happening?
He's asking questions, so he should be on the
No, at least when it comes to answering a question, I'm kidding, John. I love you.
Love you too.
Shall I ask?
Yes, Alex, please.
Okay. Thank you for this presentation here, Hussein. Could you tell us what you think Tahereh's role, or you might say, what is the counterpart that we have that embodies what she represents to the Baha'is and to the Iranian society at that time? What might be a similar role that some other woman or some other movement or ideology?
Alex, I'm glad you asked this question. It's not.
Thank you.
I think the Tahereh's station and role and name is not anymore just Persian. It has become universal. And often the writers, and this is not just the Baha'i writers, non-Baha'i writers, they compare her to somebody like Mary Magdalene during the Christian and Christ life. They compare her with Fatimah, the daughter of Prophet Muhammad. They compare her Joan of Arc in terms of her bravery and her sacrifice and eventual death. They compare her, in the Sunni sect. Islam was divided, as you all know, between Shia and Sunni. And at this point, we have 90% of Muslims are Sunnis. And they have whole set of new hero and heroine. And one of their heroine is Ayesha, who happened to be the wife of Prophet Muhammad. And in Sunni culture, or Pakistan, Indonesia, Turkey, when they talk about Tahereh, they compare her with Ayesha, who was one of the wife of Prophet Muhammad and the daughter of Abu Bakr, one of the elders of the Muslim community at that time. So then, of course, in the other contemporary culture, 18th, 19th, 20th century, there has been, of course, others. One of the book I wrote about Tahereh's life, I tried to mention that in the West, at the same time that Tahereh was making the claim of the Babi faith and teaching the new principle, there were one like Elizabeth Staten, who pushed for the suffrage of the woman in America. They were the founder of the Christian Science church. What was her name? Somebody, Eddie, I think. And that was
Eddie?
major contribution that he made. Or the founder of Sheikhi Movement, or the great black speaker and former slave Sojourner Truth. So there were lots of figures who were living contemporary Tahereh, and they were following the same principle. I think it was really the spirit of the age that was influencing all this woman through the East and the West.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Alex, for asking. Where are you, Alex?
I'm in northern Norway, 100 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle.
Good for you. I'm glad I'm not there. It's kind of cold, I'm sure. Okay, any other question?
I suppose being north of the Arctic Circle, you get eternal sunlight in summer and eternal darkness in winter, correct?
That's correct.
Sounds splendid. Well, we're happy to have you here today, Alex. Thank you for asking your great question. So, Dr. Adia, with all those beautiful questions that you had to answer today, we want to ask you one final question, and that is about your book. Can you, in a short way, explain how people can find that book?
Actually, Amazon is a place you can go. Baha'i bookstore carry all the books, and actually the one we are working right now, and hopefully it would be available soon, is a book on life of Ruhi Khanum, Amat al-Bahar Ruhi Khanum. We hear so much about her, but we really don't have the detailed information about her upbringing, her youth, her days of marriage to Shoghi Effendi. It has been quite a challenge to find material, because after I found lots of stuff before she married Shoghi Effendi, and there are good amount of information after the passing of Shoghi Effendi about her. But for a period of the life that they were married, there is not much information, written material available. And I think that it was a purpose for that, because these two, they were leading a very private life. Shoghi Effendi was quite anxious to stay as private and as away from limelight as possible. So occasionally, here and there are some stories and some mention of the two of them, but there is not really much available. But I'm also grateful to Violet Nahjabani, who has written a wonderful book called Maxwell House. And so I'm using that book a lot. And also the book Priceless Pearls is a good source. So that's our future book. So again, save your money, and we can buy that copy when it comes out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So you heard it, everyone. There are books being released, and there's also the book about Tahereh that Dr. Hussein Adia has written. So please go on Amazon if you like to take a look, or the Baha'i Publishing Trust, and peruse the books he's written. With that being said, we thank you, Dr. Adia, for coming out today. Thank you for your time, and everyone here on Zoom. We thank you for your questions on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you. We hope you have a beautiful Sunday, and we appreciate your time, Dr. Adia, once more. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. Allah